Raising Unicorns.
Harmon Brothers.
You want to do another musical intro?
Sure.
Welcome to Raising Unicorns with Harmon Brothers. Nice.
It's time for the marketing headlines.
I'm just going to rattle off a bunch of categories.
Okay.
Okay? And I want you to pick one to start off with. Okay, we got history, politics, this just in, entertainment, the bougie, or uh-oh.
Ooh, I'm a history buff, so let's go history.
History. Okay, so I was reading an article today about how a lot of companies are apologizing for their past campaigns. Specifically, I think it was mentioning like Carl's Jr. as being one of those included in Apple. It's like way in the past. It's like 20 to 30 years in the past that they're apologizing for. Should we just let the past be the past, or should we be apologizing for this?
That's an interesting question, because I feel like most of the people who are working at the company and at the agencies, like most likely they're not even having the same agency service them unless they're like a lifer, like Nike's had the same agency for like 40 plus years, right? And so it's like, but like that's super rare. Most people jump through agencies and even on big companies. So I don't think it's super necessary. It does feel like it's this thing to be like, oh, we're very, cognizant of when we did bad things. We want to apologize for it. I don't know if there's any benefit for it. Like, I don't know if you're getting I don't know. That's really tough. You might be getting some credibility with certain crowds, but other crowds, I think they're going to roll their eyes at it and be like, dude, it was the 90s. Who cares?
Well, I mean, on a previous episode, we also talked about bringing back the lime flavor, which I'm pro apple flavor on Skittles, but...
Ugh. Keith.
Okay, you're the monster.
Okay. No. Lime all day.
I was so sick of lime. I was sick of lime, and then they got rid of it, and I was so happy.
You're the problem.
Probably. But like you were saying how they turned that into a campaign, and that became the campaign of the year.
Yes.
I mean, that was an apology.
Yeah, I think it can be like done as a marketing opportunity. Like the Carl's Jr. one that was like Carl's Sr. came back and like kind of like backhanded his son for turning the company into like this like misogynistic like sex appeal campaign.
Yeah.
That was like a really funny way to like play off of that. Like, and kind of shelf that part of their history and also like kind of apologize at the same time. I think if it's done right in that way, or like how Skittles do it, I think it's a really good opportunity. But if they're just like coming out with like a press release being like, we apologize for how we marketed these, they were damaging, and I think we're going to talk about the Apple ad in just a second.
Yep, that's one of them.
I feel like that one, for context, I'll just go into it so we can kind of combine these two.
Yeah.
For context, the Apple came out with an ad. It was basically a humongous hydraulic press, right? And it was they had all these things. They had a piano, they had all this like statues, they had paints, they had all these things from the humanities in there, like books and stuff. And they had this huge hydraulic press. They just did it in slow motion where they smashed everything down. And then everything got compressed into this iPad. It's like the newest iPad. It's like crazy, super thin. It's like thinner than the iPad Nano, like just like ridiculously over-engineered. And the idea was like, you can get all these things smashed into this incredibly powerful small device.
Yeah.
But it kind of felt like it was a little tone deaf, because it was like, oh, the like technology is kind of killing the like humanities. Like, we're not playing physical pianos. We're not painting with real paint anymore. We're not writing in physical books or writing by hand. It's all done by, digital means. And it's kind of like losing a lot of the charm and magic of what the humanities used to be. And it was very widely scrutinized and almost like compared, but as a parallel to the antithesis of their 1984 ad that they did back in the day, where it was like this award-winning ad, whereas like, the Orwellian future of like super depressing, being programmed by like this overlord, and the lady comes in with a hammer and smashes it through the screen, and it's like, oh, we're going to change up things. And they've kind of become like the overlord that they were mocking in 1984. So I think that's like, but they didn't turn into a campaign of like, the apology wasn't a campaign. It was a press release and like some comments from like Tim Cook about how they were like, this was tone deaf and this was dumb. Sorry, which is very un-Apple. Like, Apple doesn't apologize for anything.
Well, yeah.
It was very odd for them to do that. This was recent, so it wasn't like a distant past thing. So it's harder to like, be like, oh, let's make fun of this thing in the past. But it was like, let's make fun of what we did last week. Weren't we so dumb last week? Idiots. So I think it's harder to make that like into a current campaign and kind of like pivot on that. I would, if I were Apple, this is unpopular opinion probably, I just would have been like, whatever, let it blow over. News cycles are so fast and tech people just love getting angry about stuff. It was still a cool video, even though I get why it was kind of dystopian in style, but I was like, whatever. I think it was a worse decision to do a comment on it because it made headlines. It made more headlines about the comment than it did about the negative like aspects that people pointed out about the ad.
Yeah, it is interesting the patterns that we're seeing in advertising right now. So right now we're going through an apologetic phase as well as trying to insert a brand into a movie.
Yeah.
We talked about this last time where it's like we're getting Barbie. They greenlit Hot Wheels. I heard a rumor that there was a Monopoly movie or whatever.
Magic 8 Ball.
Magic 8 Ball, yeah. It's interesting where advertising is going right now.
Yeah, there's also like the huge nostalgia trend right now. With like even styles and brands kind of calling back to the nostalgia, which I think that's probably maybe a little bit of why there is that apology thing. Because they're like, oh, things we did in the 70s and 80s were problematic by today's standards, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So let's call that out and have fun with it. Which I think it can be done if it's done right.
If it's done right.
But I don't know. I feel like half the time when you apologize about it, it's worse. In some ways. Don't get mad at me, internet. I just feel like sometimes it calls way more attention to it. You're throwing gasoline on the fire. So the moral of the story from this episode is don't apologize if you ever do anything offensive. Just take it down and pretend like it never exists.
Well, that leads us into another news story. This is hitting social media by storm. And usually we don't talk about billboards or anything like that, but I think this has... that we can talk about taboo subjects.
You're talking about the Times Square?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
It's on Broadway, but it's an advert, billboard.
Gotcha. Yep. Yeah. Go ahead, Keith. Talk to the audience about this. So sad.
Well, it's talking about and trying to normalize lactation cookies that help women lactate.
And how did they advertise it?
Well, they advertised it with some cookies over some breasts.
Instead of pasties, it was cookies.
It was cookies.
Nice. Pasties? I can't remember how you say it.
Prestigious.
Prestigious.
Yeah.
I think it's pasties.
Is it pasties?
Pasties.
The big argument was that for lingerie ads and things like that, you see way more.
Sure, like Victoria's Secret's everywhere. They have huge, like gigantic prints in every mall that they're in.
and they've definitely been on Times Square for sure. And so the big controversy is that the woman in the picture was pregnant.
Yeah.
And they took it down.
And she was mostly naked.
And she was mostly naked.
Yeah.
Like any Victoria's Secret model would
Yeah.
be. This kind of goes into the realm of normalizing the abnormal, which I feel like Harmon Brothers is really good at.
Yeah. And I think this is an interesting topic because we've always tried to tread just on the line but never cross it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because like I think that like, you know, there's something healthy about like normalizing breastfeeding in public for women so they don't feel uncomfortable. Don't feel like they have to like suffocate underneath some cover up. I think it's a very positive thing, but it is one of those things where you're kind of subjective to the cultural zeitgeist. And the fact is like, obviously there's a bunch of people who are still uncomfortable with this like type of thing.
Yeah.
And so I feel like if this was us doing this and we had it was like, you know, I don't think we would go this direction, but if we did do this, I feel like we would have crossed the line because the feedback was strong enough that it got struck down.
Yeah.
And we're always trying to get it to the edge where we think we can get away with it. And it's also not offending most people's sensibilities, but it's also kind of like shocking them enough to kind of stick in their brain a little bit more and kind of remember it a little bit more.
Yeah. So, in your opinion, you think they crossed the line for that one?
Oh, do I think they crossed it morally? I don't know. That's like probably not, but I think for the audience and for the general public, obviously like it did. Like so, and then those are two different things I think, right? Of like, what are you comfortable with as an agency or as a group who's doing the advertising or company, and then what is actually going to be accepted and be on that like right on that line for the general zeitgeist. And I think that's one of our superpowers we've had throughout the year is like having a good brain trust internally to gut check those things against each other, because it's really easy when you're making jokes and you get in the small room of people and writers to push it too far and you've broken it, and it's easy to not realize that without getting, you know, some critical feedback from certain people who kind of have a really good pulse on what's going to be too much.
I guess this begs the question, like, how do you know when you've crossed the line, or like how, like, what is our process? to get there?
Yeah, it's very much so having that brain trust that I said. That, and part of that is like the core writing team, obviously, and the creative director is part of it. But then you have external people who are not in the throes of the project, not in the middle of it, who weren't at the writing retreat, that weren't part of the creative process, that can see it with fresh eyes. And like, for instance, we just had an instance with this one of our clients where we basically were like, I think some of these jokes cross the line. And that's because the brain trust feedback said, these are too much, these are too overt. And part of the feedback too was like, it's just not clever enough. This feels a little too on the nose or easy, like low hanging fruit. And we like to be like, play it a little bit more clever. And this feels like not beneath us, but like we expect better of our writing to be like clever. And so we actually had a meeting with our client last week, and kind of gave them that feedback, and they were super receptive to it because they're like, well, we don't want to be, too base or too like on the nose with some of these jokes, so let's switch it up. And so it actually influenced the whole content as on a whole, like on the whole, like we're changing the concept overall. Dang. So I think it's like the key is like getting someone you trust creatively who's not in the middle of it to give you feedback and give you fresh perspective, and can go to that 30,000 level feet and it can basically say, I think this is too much. You ready for the next one, Keith?
Oh, I'm ready.
Netflix has had a paid ad tier or a paid tier of their streaming service that has ads. And I think as of right now, they're actually using third-party placements on there. They're not doing it internally, like it's not their own ad platform, but they are developing their own ad platform with their own metrics and with their own like kind of dashboard, which is a pretty big investment. But I'm curious to know what your thoughts are about, like, because obviously Netflix was ad free for forever. Yeah. Until last year? I think is when they introduced their first. Ad
it was
plan.
either last year or the year before.
So very recent in their history. Some people are like, oh, so disruptive to content. But I would love to hear your thoughts on the marketing space as a whole and like placement as a whole, what you feel about Netflix taking over that space and introducing that.
I guess this is more of like a personal opinion, but I feel like ad work itself is needing to change because we've been in the TikTok space for a while now. And with how fast technology is moving, like the fact that we're still relying on TikTok for advertising the short form content, it just needed to be pushed somewhere else. It wasn't going to streaming services at the time because streaming services were ad free, which I like. But
it's a better user experience without ads. It's not disruptive.
Definitely. But it definitely needed to adapt, and I think this is the new foray into it, making streaming services almost like live TV. Yeah. I did see a statistic while doing some research that about 40% of Netflix is in ad. Really? Is doing the ad tier.
Ad tier of their plans. Yeah. That's higher than I would have anticipated because so many got acclimated to it for decades. Oh, yeah. Almost 2 decades of having an ad-free, not 2 decades. Has it been 20? It's been a decade about since they did the streaming.
I mean, I don't know if you felt it, but it almost felt like we were in some sort of recession. So everyone might have been pulling back and going the cheaper ad.
And I think too, like even the quality of content that they were producing and like the big hits, they didn't have, I feel like they've had a tougher time getting big hits. Yeah. Like they didn't have like Stranger Things has been farther and farther apart between seasons. Yeah. The Game of, or House of Cards ended. There wasn't as many big tent poles to like pull people in. Yeah. And I think also the other streaming platforms had a lot more big content that was like, with introduction of Apple TV into the mix, as well as Hulu and Amazon getting some huge properties. Yep. That people were like, oh man, now if I have all these streaming services, I'm paying for all the ad-free versions. This is more expensive than my cable bill was by some margin. Like if you're paying for Hulu, Amazon, Netflix, HBO, Disney, like you're over $100 easy if you're on the ad-free plans.
Super easy. And so people might have been pulling back and just going the ad version.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree with you, Keith. I think that having a different outlet and actually having it not be centralized into, okay, more content is going on TikTok, more content is going on Meta, or more content is going on YouTube or Google is very positive, especially if you actually have a powerful dashboard that has attribution. I think the big question I always have with these platforms is most advertising is disruptive, but you're in the middle of a television show and you're disrupting them in the middle of like, I want to get to the next scene. Yeah. And so it's like, how effective can those ads be? And is there a way to make those ads more effective for like advertisers who are placing those ads, because I've had this idea for a long time. Netflix, if you want to take this, I'll be happy if you do. You know, when like the credits roll at the end and it has like play the next episode.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really interesting if you had, instead of seeing the credits there or even the next episode, if they minimized that and you had a list of all the ads you saw during the episode. So you had like a break point that was natural to where you could click through or save that link or save that offer or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like there's like, I don't know, but watching like Hulu is the only one we have with like ads, and most of them are for insurance or pharmaceuticals, so this isn't the case. But if it's for a consumer product, I'm always wanting to get on with the scene, and even if it's something I'm interested in, I don't have a way to save it. I don't have a way to like, unless I stop and like look it up on my phone, or even if I do look it up on the phone and the autoplay's going, I'm instantly pulled back into the show, which I think decreases the effectiveness of the ad. So if there's a way to do it where you could save it inside Hulu for save those links in like a library, or they could do it on a breaking point like the end of the episode where they could go visit that in between, I think that'd be good. The problem is Netflix has publicly stated like the biggest like their goal is to get you to watch as much Netflix as humanly possible, and so anything that disrupts that or takes them off platform is a negative to them, because they're like, well, we need people to feel like there's a lot of value they're getting out of their subscription. But I would argue to Netflix and other providers, if you have good ads and a good way to have a good ad experience that you can actually derive benefit from in a way that's not as disruptive, I think people would actually be like, kind of like, it's a better ad experience. Like no one's really giving them. You can do that on social media, you know, with Instagram, but I feel like the pace is so much faster. You're already used to just ripping through different things. Yeah. I think it's positive to have any other player in there that's not, you know, part of that big three of TikTok, Meta, and YouTube. Yeah. Owning a bunch of that ad space.
Oh, definitely. A lot of the articles that I saw when I was doing research were based on a company being sued. It might be multiple companies being sued for their advertisings being misleading and or false.
What specific products or companies were kind of under fire?
Well, the big one that came up, and this was like 2 hours ago, Joe Rogan backed pharma health supplements that are being misleading for false advertising.
Okay. I thought you were saying he backed like a big pharma company, like
Joe Rogan
GSK
backed pharma company. So whatever that is.
Is it a nutraceutical or is it like a pharmaceutical company? Because a lot of the ones on Joe Rogan, they promoted like supplements.
It does say health supplement. Yeah. So yeah, it's a health supplement, but they're being misleading with their advertising.
Yeah, right. Promising crazy results. Yeah. From this. Yeah.
And so I think we can talk about for a second about how important it is to be truthful in your advertising. Yeah. Specifically, like we go to end's length to make sure that when we're showing a product use case or anything on our advertising, that it is 100% that like
true to form.
True to form.
Yeah.
A big example is the
boot machine for zero res.
The boot machine for zero res.
What a giant pain in the butt.
Oh, I believe it.
It took so long.
How long did you have that thing running?
So for the audience who hasn't seen the Zero Res campaign, basically we had 3 different cleaning methods that we set up. One was like a steaming cleaning, one was a chem dry cleaning method, and then Zero Res. And the way we did it was we had 3 different carpet circles that went on this rotating platform that had these boots that would actually like, you know, step on it and simulate wear and tear. And we'd also have this like basically this shaker that would shake out like dust and particulates and dirt onto it. So the boots would simulate and actually put like 150 pounds of pressure on every step. Oh, dang. So it was like pretty aggressive in terms of scratching the carpet and like working the dirt right into it. Yeah. And then we would get it really dirty. We'd clean it with a chemical process. And then we would simulate 6 months of wear by running it for like, 4 minutes, vacuum it, run it, vacuum it, run it, vacuum it, to simulate what people do after they get the carpets clean. It does sound like a pain in
the butt if you're going to do that.
It was tremendous. It probably took like 7 hours to get it done right, like a filming, and just like, and we had to do this on time lapses so we could actually show the process in the behind the scenes. Yeah, so the idea was you could see the idea behind the ad is that like Zero Res doesn't leave any residue left, which doesn't attract dirt over time, so your carpets stay cleaner longer. Mm-hmm. And so with that, we were basically trying to show that with the steam cleaner and the chem dry cleaner, they attracted dirt, even though they were getting vacuumed the same amount of time and going through the same exact traffic process. And it worked out really, really well to show that physically it was like so stark. We didn't have to do any manipulation in post to show how much worse those were. And we did everything by the book of how like a chem dry cleaner would work or how a steam cleaner would work. It's just like the technology really is that demonstrable and that much better. So we went to a lot of lengths, and we were way over budget to do this because it turned into like we had to reshoot it twice because we had some technical difficulties. Yeah, it was a mess. But we wanted to do it right and not and kind of have everything be above board. So like the behind the scenes, they could see the whole. The original idea was we're going to leave the whole like 8-hour stream for them to just like watch and see. To scrutinize. Just
watch this boot go.
Yeah, and then watch the vacuum mirror, make sure we're vacuuming for the exact same time. Because we had a stopwatch on set where we're saying like, okay, you have 1 minute to vacuum this little square or this little circle of carpet. So it was very like regulated because there was no way to like, you know, a lot of times we work with clients, they have power claims that they have like third-party studies on or they've done in a laboratory. But this one, there was no way to articulate the technology, or there was no like studies that they could cite that had a power claim. So like we got to create our own. And that's a big thing we work with clients. It's like, what's your power claim that has either like research backing behind it so we can point to that, or like how can we show that like physically for you if you don't have a strong power claim with a statistic? How can we build a demonstration that's visually interesting? Like I think I like a BedJet like sweat test, right? Where we poured, it was like a quart of water over 2 mannequins. One was in like a cooling bed that had like the cooling technology on the mattress, and then one was like the BedJet
in the heated one.
Yeah, in the heated. Well, I think they were both. I can't remember. I think they were both heated ones.
Okay.
But the idea is the BedJet clears humidity out and dries, whereas the other one might get warm in temperature, but it keeps the moisture trapped in the bed.
It might have been like just a regular bed sheet.
Right.
Versus the BedJet.
But yeah, we're trying to show how much more moisture it removes by circulating dry, hot air underneath the bed, underneath your covers. And it was like one was still sopping wet, one was bone dry after just it was like 15 minutes of it running. So I think like those types of visuals for us are like really critical to find and craft for the clients because those are something that's really compelling and can really be like, we call them tipping point moments where people are like, oh, now I get it. That's like wildly impressive.
Yeah, that's the big sell.
Yeah.
That's what wins the customers over.
Yeah, now they're like, well, now that I saw that, I'm in.
I'm all in.
Yeah.
It's even more powerful if the customer experiences that after watching it as well.
Yeah. It's like you want to try and do something that they can replicate to some degree. Like I go all the way back to like the OraBrush bad breath test. We call it litmus tests, right? That they can reproduce on their own. Where like the test is you can take a spoon and you can scrape off your tongue and you can let it dry and smell it, and it smells horrific because you got all sorts of crap and gunk in there. Then you can take an OraBrush, you can clean out the little like your tongue because it has these little grooves and all the little like, I'm trying to remember what they're called, like papilla or something like that, or like
papilla.
I can't remember what they're called. It's basically like the taste buds on your tongue. It's like a carpet, right? And so the OraBrush gets in there and cleans and scrapes it all out. And after you clean it with the OraBrush, you do the same test with a spoon, let it dry, and it smells completely fine. Doesn't smell like anything because you've cleaned everything out, right? So it's something that the customer can replicate on their own to be like, wow, I can see and smell the difference that I can replicate. I don't think people are going to do it with zero res tests. That's why we had to do it to that degree because it's hard to quantify. But we tried to do it as much as we could so they could see it for their own selves, like in the video or in the 8-hour cut.
Yeah. We also did something similar for Kizik, right? Where we had the press.
Yeah, we had a pneumatic press that kind of like compressed the heel over and over and over.
Showed how many times it could do it versus an actual shoe.
Yeah, I think we did it 10,000 compressions and it didn't sag at all.
It took a long time on set.
Yeah. We probably should have done that one in the studio with like 3 people doing it versus like
probably. But
the whole crew.
I think we went to lunch as we were filming. So,
but yeah, point is like showing durability in a way that's like, or like the features and call outs of the product in a visually demonstrable way that's like impressive.
Yeah.
And might speak to a doubt or concern, kind of like with Kizik. It's like, oh, can their heel, if I'm going to step into this thing, is it really going to withstand this? Is it really going to be strong enough? We'll try to show them. Yes, it is.
Well, learn your lesson. Be honest in your advertising.
Be honest. And if you're working on a product that you don't have a solid power claim either and a statistic with like some research, figure out a way you can show it like visually. And if you can't do that, you should probably invest into research if there's an actual path to get like research done to show it. Because like Lumi was another one. Lumi's really hard because it's like it's all subjective to different people. And so they went and paid this Princeton consumer research guy to test it. And he's like, it's a 72-hour like odor control like test that he did.
Yeah,
and
that was a huge power claim.
That probably was one of the best investments that Shannon ever did with that brand because
for sure.
It's right there on the label. It's featured in the advertising. It's a very bold claim, if I'm being honest. And it like surpasses anything that any of the big guys did. And so I think that's a really strong thing she was able to lean into and had confidence behind because she believed in the product and she had like third-party validation from it. All right, man. I feel like we've covered a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, there's been a lot going on. I guess quick recap.
Know the line.
Yeah.
Figure out where the line is. Gut check yourself so you don't cross the line. Well, even if you don't feel like it's like you've crossed the line personally, the public might disagree.
I think the lesson there is get out of your circle.
Yeah, get outside feedback.
And
then Netflix might be good for having another player in the game, but they need to make the ad experience better for consumers and for the people who are placing the ads.
That goes for all streaming services.
All of them.
And be truthful in your marketing because it pays.
Up top, Keith.
Yo!
All right, thanks, man. Till next time.
Thank you for watching Raising Unicorns!
Subscribe now.